right, so Google's actually saying there is a possibility that you can indeed recover from the HCU. They are also saying it's possible you might not ever have even actually been hit by the HCU. It might just be that better quality sites have replaced you in the rankings, although that's a little bit hard to swallow. We're going to talk about all of that, as well as I'm going to share an update on my own website traffic and data and what's been happening on it recently. I'll give you a hint, though. It stinks. If you don't know, my name's Rob. I'm just some average bozo that likes talking about blogging and SEO. If you're into those types of things, if those are in your wheelhouse, if those are what make you tick, hit subscribe, hit like on this video. Let's get into what Google said. So I'm on a website, SEO Roundtable, which is ran by Barry Schwartz. I'm going to link to this article down below, as well as his X or Twitter profile and his YouTube channel. Barry spends a ton of time summarizing and collating everything that's going on within the world of SEO and does a fantastic job of summarizing it for dum-dums like myself who need it to be cliff noted so we understand it. So he wrote this really good summarization article about what Google actually said this week. And a lot of this had to do with a conversation or multiple conversations with the Google search liaison, which is Danny Sullivan over there on X, who has been trying his damnedest to answer questions the best he possibly can, considering that I think that there's not been a lot of real clarity, probably that he hasn't been able to give us good answers, because I'm not sure he's really had good answers to give, but he's doing his best. So one of the things, there's several things in this particular snippet right here. He added that the help document says, now this is what Google Search Liaison says, natural question some will have, I think pretty much everybody, is how long will it take for a site to do better if it removes unhelpful content? Sites identified by the system may find the signal applied to them over a period of months. That feels a little bit familiar because it's been 5 months and we've seen some ups and downs, but all generally down. Now, this is really important. Our classifier runs continuously, allowing it to monitor newly launched sites and existing ones. So for those of us that have felt like the HCU classifier was a one-time slap in the face and then Google turned its back on us, it doesn't sound like that. It sounds like it's actually something that is always available to be updated, that our site could always have an impact as far as whether or not that classifier is placed on us or to what degree. Pretty big deal there. As it determines that the unhelpful content has a return in the long term, in other words, if it thinks that it's actually gone and is going to stay gone, whatever the unhelpful content was, the classification will no longer apply. That's interesting because that also makes it sound like it can actually recover. That classifier can actually be removed. It goes on and it talks about the classifier process entirely automated. Again, no manual actions, no punishments, anything like that. One of many Google signals to evaluate ranking content. This is also interesting. This means that some people first content on sites classified as having unhelpful content could still rank well if there are other signals identifying that people first content as helpful and relevant to the query. Although this is a little bit hard to swallow because if you look at the current rankings, not quality sites, so why are that means they didn't get hit with a classifier, which that's a little bit convoluted. It's a little bit strange. The signal is also weighted. Sites with lots of unhelpful content may notice a stronger effect. Again, a little bit hard to swallow there, but that's what it is in the documentation. So again, here we talk about, somebody says, does this mean that until the next updates, the classifier may be lifted or applied? In other words, given or removed, or is there a monthly, bi-monthly check? So Daniel's actually asking, when is this classifier checking our stuff? Sullivan replied, the classifier is always running. If it sees a site has reduced unhelpful content, the site might start performing better at any time. Now, he says might, right? So it's a little bit loose there, i.e. maybe somebody made some changes to reduce this several months ago. The classifier is checking, and basically says, oh, I kind of think this has been long-term change, and the assessment shifts. So that's really interesting because it's not just checking for unhelpful content. It's also checking to see, like, are these changes that are being made, is this unhelpful content being removed? And they have proven over a period of time that they are not going to basically start putting more unhelpful content back in. They have to prove themselves, essentially, is what's being said here, which is pretty interesting, not something we've talked about before. It's not like you have to wait until the next time a classifier itself might get updated. We do update it from time to time to make it better, but sites that improve could see a change independently of that. Pretty interesting stuff there. So for a lot of us that thought, well, if we do this thing to our site, our traffic is going to return. It doesn't sound like that's the case. A single thing isn't going to, and look, we haven't seen a single example of true recovery in the HCU, and this kind of feels like this fits into that. The sites have to prove themselves over time, that the classifier is always running, that there's just no sort of timetable on what to expect out of this thing. So the fact that we haven't seen a single example, to me, with this in context, especially the part about proving yourself, makes the fact that there's no examples of recovery a little bit easier to swallow. Because I think we got too much into a thing of like, we're like, look, if you've been punished, it's just over, right? Because nobody's recovering. But maybe nobody's recovering because the algorithm, whatever time it takes to determine if the unhelpful content is truly pruned or is truly gone, maybe just take some time. Remember, this has only been 5 months right now since the HCU. So at least there's some sort of indication here from Google of it is possible to have some sort of recovery, right? And B, what that process actually looks like for recovery. It's not a fix this thing on your site and the next day your traffic's going to come back. It is asking you to essentially prove yourself. Now, there's a lot that's really hard to swallow in there because if you look at the current rankings, the amount of spam that's in there, obviously the fact that Google hasn't been able to get on top of that and deal with that and remove that stuff from the rankings makes you kind of go, well, how can we trust anything that they say about what's helpful or unhelpful whenever there's a ton of just absolute garbage in the rankings right now? And that's a very fair point. But I think that you have to keep in mind that just because that's true, that a lot of the current SERPs stink and they're full of spam and they're full of, frankly, sites and articles that shouldn't be there, doesn't make it untrue what Danny is saying here about the unhelpful content on our own sites, right? It might just be that that's stuff that is getting dealt with in a separate manner. So I think that you almost have to, we have nothing else, frankly, to go off of right now. We have to take what Danny is saying here and go with sort of like the idea of we need to prove ourselves over amount of time. So I thought that was really, really interesting. Now, something else that happened over this week was the same Google search liaison also said there's a lot of people that think that they got hit by the HCU and they didn't. They actually just got replaced by better articles. And I think that that's very true, but hear me out on this. Here's why. There was a bunch of people whenever the HCU first came out and slapped a bunch of people, and then they recovered very fast. But if you looked at their traffic, they lost like 20% of their traffic. And so for those of us that lost like 80% or 90% at that point, we're like, well, that's not really, you didn't really get hit. And it turns out that that's probably true. They probably didn't actually get hit, or at least a lot of them didn't get hit. It just turns out that the algorithms and the updates that Google was pushing at that time put other articles in front of them during that process. So I actually appreciated that Google came out and said, like, look, not all of this is HCU. Some of this is actually just you got outworked. You got outperformed by other articles, and that's why you lost your traffic. Now, those of us that lost 70% and up, that's very hard for me to swallow that this is simply just a matter of other better ranking articles replaced us in the rankings, especially when you do look at those rankings and you're like, oh my God, oh, those can't be. Surely that's not what Google is considering quality. So I think that that's the discrepancy there, is those that lost 20%, maybe 30%, some of those just simply were touched by an algorithm because SERPs were moving around. I think if you're 70% and up, to me, that's probably a valid HCU spanking, so to speak. I want to talk a little bit about what's happening on my website because I haven't done this for a little bit. Just for context, here was my traffic prior to the HCU. You can see 17 clicks at 1,700, 1,500 clicks a day, etc. HCU came in. Now, during the first wave of the HCU, and this actually takes me back to what Danny Sullivan said about how the algorithm is always running, the classifier is always running, because my website has lived at varying levels during the last several months, all still beat up pretty bad, but like here, it never got under 100 clicks. You can see as I kind of go through there, never under 100 clicks a day. And then I had a little bit of a bump in traffic, and then it dropped back down again, back to 100 clicks a day. And now, over the course of the past 2 weeks, there's many days where I'm under 100 clicks, as you can see here, which is, again, going from 1,500 to 700 clicks a day to, 78. It doesn't hurt and doesn't feel good. And so it does feel like there is movement happening here. Despite the fact I've added in articles, despite the fact I've tried to prune articles, I've removed some, etc., traffic but nobody's is moving. Nobody that got hit like this is moving in the right direction. So frankly, seeing that Search Liaison is saying some of this stuff gives me a little bit of solace that I understand the process a little bit better, or at least what is being pitched as the process. Whether or not it's true, we'll probably never know, but I have nothing else to lean on at this point. That's all that I got for you. Thanks y'all so much for watching. If you haven't already, hit subscribe on this. I'm going to do another deep dive this week on some of the most recent keywords that I have lost to other articles to try to figure out what they have that I don't have. Well, spam seems to be one of them. Well, for whatever reason, thank you, HCU. I don't know. But hey, apparently recovery is possible. And so we just have to prove ourselves. What that means in the long term, we don't know exactly yet, but at least it puts everything into a little bit of context. Thanks y'all so much for watching. We'll see you on the next video. Peace out.